I'm CaptainPira, and this is my first two-part video because this ended up being kind of a lot. When I decided I wanted to cosplay from Hades, I was pretty set on being a Fury, although Nyx, I went through all my stash fabric, and initially I was looking for stuff for Electo because I had a blonde wig that would work in my stash, but I really wanted to be Megaera, so after going through this much fabric that would have worked for Electo. My main fabric for Megaera is going to be this spandex I picked up real cheap when I was learning to make bodysuits and needed something to practice with. It's got kind of a waffle to it, and it'll give it kind of like an 80s athleisure look, so that could be terrible or amazing. The wings, I have this really cool metallic scale stuff, but I don't know that Megaera's wings reflect green. They seem to be pink in a lot of the art. This appears to be my only stretch gold, so this is not going to end up matching my paint no matter what gold I use for my paint. But I'll have to live with that. Oh yeah, I knew I had a gold or gold somewhere. It's a little wrinkled from being in my stash forever, but this has a pretty good stretch. I used it for the armor on my Camilla build. It stretches more one way than the other, but that should be perfect for the leg stripes. Ooh, got like Andrea leftovers. I'll probably use that for at least part of the wings. I think this neoprene scuba, it's kind of a charcoaly gray. That'll probably be for my undershirt, and I think there's a little on the legs. Well, that's enough of my materials. I think I can start sewing. To get perfect fitting tights, I get my pattern by tracing off a pair of my own. Then, I mark the side and center front to help with design placement. The X on Meg's thighs should cross at the front, and to look like a continuous wrap, need to match at the seams. Here's my pattern cut out. The gold fabric is two-way stretch PVC, so I have to align my pieces horizontally along the stretch with seam allowance. It's tricky with scraps. There's more of the blue material left, so I can fold it over to cut my pieces. It does have a grid pattern though, so I have to maintain the grain throughout my pieces. There aren't a lot of leg refs for Meg, but it looks like her knees are grey, so I'm using that for under the shin armor as well. This was a neoprene scrap and doesn't stretch as much as my spandex, so it needs cut wider. The insets are easier to quilt together before you join the larger pieces. It helps if you decide which side you want the seam to lay on as you clip them. I'm using clips to avoid putting holes in the PVC. The serger was chosen for how stretchy its stitches are. Since spandex doesn't tend to fray, a stretched stitch would do just as well. Now instead of crisscrosses, we have a pretty solid band to join to the top. I cut in the V down to the seam allowance so the gold won't bunch, then start clipping again, working from the V out to the sides. The corners have been giving me some trouble, but I found the best way is to stitch them down ahead of time. And then I can go in and serge the edges and it's fine. Some of the stitching didn't catch the fabric at the points, so I went back and reinforced them. I'm using 3 different stretch fabrics and they all stretch a different amount, and I swear that will be the death of me. All of them have a different amount of stretch. This is what I'm pretty much used to. The gold only kind of stretches one way, and much less. I thought it would be okay because it's only stripes, but this is a lot further off than it should be. And then finally I'm using neoprene, which I think has the least stretch of all 3. Here's hoping I get something that'll actually fit. The lower leg is wider because the fabric has less stretch, so I try to stretch the gold a little when I join them, but not too much that it's bumpy. And the leg panel is complete. Time to turn it into leggings. Fold each leg and clip from the crotch to the ankle. I tried it on to make sure it fit well before repeating for the other leg. When you've got 2 leg tubes, you can sew them together at the front and butt. So, they're a little tight, but I wasn't sure they'd fit at all, so that's kind of a relief. I can kind of stick my leggy out. I think that just not going anywhere for months is more the problem than the pants at this point. Yeah, they need a waistband still. That will keep them a little higher up. They still need a waistband, so I'll be using the one I cut off some tights from my cyberpunk video. The undershirt is also using clothing I have as the pattern, and also neoprene, so needs extra room. None of the trim in my stash is quite big enough, so I made the braid out of 3 tubes of gold fabric. Cut and folded the way you would for bias tape. I clip them in place to avoid seams, braid them together, and then loosely stitch the piece to my arm opening. And with my gold braid on, my undershirt is basically complete, it just needs straps. So we'll measure from the one corner to the other corner, and it's about 16 inches. My undershirt is a bit long, causing bunching, so I trimmed the bottom and used this to make my straps by folding the outer edges inward. I can run this over with a zigzag stitch to make stretchy straps. So, straps are on. So 16 ended up being way too many inches for the straps, so I had to seam pluck it and try again. But it fits pretty good, so victory! I have made a very tiny top. Still trying to make the most of my remnant fabrics, I managed to squeeze out enough for a cuff. To be sure, I add a bit more to the side, as well as the blue band to the top. With its general shape, I can trace it off to determine the triangle detail placement. For these, I cut triangles out of scraps, folded their edges over, and stitched them to the base fabric. The outer edge of each triangle row needs to be covered in gold tubing. Once the side is stitched, the bracer's complete. Since the PVC is prone to cracks if stretched too far, I left about 1 inch open at the wrist, where I'll add a snap closure. Since I don't want to paint my whole arms, and it'll help my bracelets stay in place, I decided to make sleeves. Using white glitter power mesh left over from my Yuri on Ice cosplay, and a shirt with raglan sleeves for my pattern. The bicep band needs to be as wide as that space on my sleeve. Once the edges are hemmed, I place it on the sleeve where I want it to stay on my arm and pin together the sleeve. Onto the other arm. The arm wrap is using a long offcut of my blue spandex, trimmed enough to have no sharp angles. I pin one end into my sleeve seam, allowing the rest to hang out so it can be wrapped later. So here's the one sleeve. It just makes me a little desaturated, so I might try and get some blues on. I'll probably do a makeup test and then see what I need to do to balance out between the two. And I should probably make some gloves. The wrap won't fall off because it is sewn on the inside to my sleeve. My sleeves are completed. If I had planned on using them from the beginning, these straps would be a little tighter and wouldn't be sliding down, so I'll probably add an elastic piece from here to here just to keep it upright so that I'm not constantly adjusting it when I already have shoulder pads to deal with. I've added my strap into my seam so I don't have to worry about it sliding down. It can't go any further than this. It goes on pretty easily, and if I do decide to make gloves as well, I should be able to tuck it under here. For the toga, I started with a really baggy shirt about the same length. On one side, I included the sleeve, but it didn't end up being necessary. I sewed my side seams, then trimmed the sleeve and the opening on the opposite side, and pleat the folds into the gathered shoulder. The bottom stripe is grey, so I trim a neoprene offcut to about 4 inches, sew it to the shirt's bottom, and hem the edge. I also hem the opening and fold in what's left of my sleeve. The front of the belt is the most structurally unsound, so to make it sturdier, I'm stringing my beads on garden wire. To create hooks on the ends, I wrap back half of my wire and twist the base to join, then fold my doubled wire for the hooks. The belt needs to be the circumference of my waist minus most of the front panel. I want the belt to have some structure, so I'm using gold heavy vinyl instead of stretch PVC for the main body, and backing it with twill for extra strength. Then I'm joining the shell and lining with gold bias tape. Then it just needs some eyelets so I can latch the front piece through. It turned out a bit big, but I can bend the wire closer in to fight that. And my sewing is complete. I still need to hook up the strap, but otherwise, pretty content. And that's how I finished everything. Just kidding. Part 2 will have the armor and the wings. As usual, this ended up being a way bigger belt than I anticipated. The sewing was pretty simple. I got this done in a very casual week. The armor, however, took a long time to prime and paint and wait for things to dry. So this is going to be a two-part video this time. I apologize. If you made it this far, thanks for watching. Consider giving me a like or a sub if you want to see part 2 and figure out how all the fiddly bits are made. How long did it take you to break out of hell? I think for me it was like 35 runs. Who's your favorite Hades character and why is it Thanos? Thanks for watching!